Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Big 7 here. I'm going to be going through last week's results pretty quickly for the main slate, and then I'm doing a different kind of video today. Normally I would have my breakdowns of players that I'm using for tomorrow's main slate, but for a number of reasons I haven't built that yet, which I will go into throughout the video. If you do enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Without any further ado, let's get into it. So, last week, I'm not going to call it a train wreck, but it was a bit disappointing. Took $195, but I put $300 in, and it was a weird slate for a number of reasons. In previous weeks, the winner has been getting to about 200, 220. Last week they got to 250, I think, and no one even popped 200 this week. That was for a number of reasons. The main one being that none of the big players really popped last week. So if I go through and look at the quarterbacks, Lamar had a massive week again. I only had exposure in one of my teams, unfortunately. Other than that, yeah, some quarterbacks putting up some okay numbers. Trevor Lawrence did alright as well at a cheap price point. And then looking at running backs, I mean, you've got Derrick Henry who's up there. But other than that, it's just a bunch of really cheap guys. If we look at the higher price players, I put a lot of Jonathan Taylor in. He was disappointing with the 12. The big dogs, they're not eating at the moment. Um, Derrick Henry, the only one really that's a premium option that could have been considered last week that did actually put up a performance fitting of the price tag. It's like you could have easily gone for like a Bryce Hall. I had a bit of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Josh Jacobs, which did contribute to me cashing a bit. And then wide receivers was even weirder. I mean, we look at this list. Devonta Smith, I faded in completely, unfortunately, despite having a few Philly stacks. I didn't realize he was going to be as involved as he was in that offense. So he's an option going forward. But all of these guys, they're under 10K. The top 10 or so wide receivers, they're all value options. Hollywood Brown finally went off. Chris Olave had a few of. Then, yeah, your premium guys, AJ Brown under 20. And then your super premium guys, which is kind of what I was trying to build to last week. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, uh, Diggs, Adams, Chase. None of them putting up a big score. So that was a bit disappointing. Tight ends, I had a lot of Mark Andrews and a lot of Kelsey. So overall, that did hold me in good stead. And defense, yeah, I had a lot of the Eagles. I thought they could terrorize Carson Wentz, which they did. And the other one I had a lot of was the Bucks, who were kind of middle of the pack. So yeah, like I said, 20 entries, $300, six of them cashing, none of them really getting too close. So top ones, yeah, had a lot of Damian Pierce as well. Yeah, just not a lot of big dogs firing. I had a lot of that Amon Ra and Justin Jefferson stack, or pairing them together, and Amon Ra is injured now and was hobbled during that game. And Justin Jefferson, I think he was just being triple teamed all game. So now that brings us into this week, and this week is really, really interesting. Because if we look at the games in here, there's really one game that stands out as the game where it should be a shootout. You've got two high scoring offenses against defenses that are battered a bit, and that is Baltimore and Buffalo. According to betting odds, this is the clear biggest game in terms of total points. It's currently sitting at 51.5. It was at 51 yesterday. But the really interesting thing about that is there's according to RotoWire, there's a big chance that This game could be weather impacted. So I'm really looking at this game closely because if it's anything like normal, then you just want to stack this game really aggressively because there's not really any standout other options in here. But if the game is in poor conditions, then you have to pivot somewhere, and it's going to be there isn't really an obvious pivot option. Um, the other game I was looking at um, earlier in the week as a way to pivot away from this Bills Ravens game was the Jags Eagles game, and that's expected to be raining as well. Hurts has been putting up good numbers. Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked too bad, but yeah, that's in danger of being downgraded as well. And the total points line for that game has actually moved because it was at I think it was at 48 and a half when I looked on Friday. Now when I look at it, it's down to 45 and a half. So it's a really interesting slate in that aspect. And I don't want to really commit to building lineups yet because if that Baltimore and Buffalo game is played in a pond, then I want to pivot away from that game. But if it's anything like normal, then I want to absolutely load into that game, probably with about 70 to 80% of my entries having a Buffalo and Baltimore stack. So I am going to show, um, I'm going to build some teams just on here, showing how easy it is to build Baltimore and Buffalo stacks. But this could be rendered useless by the time it's game time. But yeah, so just assuming all things normal, you've got I'll go through the quarterbacks. You've got Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, the clear top two quarterbacks on the slate, and then you've got Jalen Hurts, who would have been the clear third option, maybe even pushing these top two guys, but that game is expected to be hit by weather as well. And yeah, just not any really outstanding options below that. So we'll go Lamar for now. So from the Baltimore side of stacking, it is fairly simple. You've got your top tight end on the slate, which is Mark Andrews, and he's like clearly the top option. There's no Kelsey. He's playing in the Sunday night football game. So Andrews is the obvious option to stack with Lamar. I'm not sure if you want to double stack Baltimore options. I'm probably not looking to do that very often. So if you do want to pivot away from Andrews, if you can find a cheaper tight end that you like, then you can throw Rashad Bateman in there as well. On the Buffalo side of things, Dawson Knox is one of those cheap tight ends that you can pivot away to, and he's a player you can pick hoping that this game will go into shootout territory, which it is a pretty high chance of doing if the weather holds up or isn't too severe. You've also got a lot of other Buffalo options that you can put into the lineup. Stephon Diggs has been on tear at the start of the year. Gabe Davis has been a little underwhelming and is questionable but expected to play. Isaiah McKenzie at 6.5 put up a big week last week. That was without Gabe Davis, I think. Yeah, it was. But he is capable of hitting the end zone, and 6.5 grand averaging. If he hits his average, then you're pretty happy with that. Crowder also comes into play if Gabe Davis doesn't get up, but I think I prefer Isaiah McKenzie. So if I'm just building a typical kind of lineup, this is going to be pretty chalky. Stephon Diggs and Mark Andrews. If I'm picking Lamar, do I want a second Buffalo option going back the other way? Definitely be tempted. We'll throw a Gabe Davis in there for now. And yeah, so this is a fairly template team, but there's a lot of value on the slate that to build the rest of team around. So going into the running backs, there's a couple of guys that are going to have the workhorse role for their team, and they are coming in very cheap. First one is Jamal Williams. He's almost a lock. You've got DeAndre Swift, who is sitting out this week, which means that all of that workload that Swift has been getting goes to Jamal Williams. Maybe a little bit goes to Craig Reynolds as well, but Jamal Williams as a number one back in this offense against a Seahawks team that is pretty weak, he's almost a must-have for me. And then the second running back, there's a few more options down here. Nick Chubb coming up against Atlanta, he's definitely one that's underpriced. Was looking a bit at Javonte Williams if Melvin Gordon was going to be out, but it seems like Melvin Gordon will be playing and taking some of that workload. So I think I'm fading Javonte. Derrick Henry had a big week last week. If he's back to his best, then 11,600 is way too cheap. And then we go into some of the cheaper guys. Bryce Hall has been getting more workload. Question marks how he does with Wilson at quarterback. Josh Jacobs, again, undervalued. He's due to hit the end zone at some point. But the one that is really outstanding value to me is Khalil Herbert. He's taken the most of his opportunities in the past. It is a low game total, but he's going to be the clear number one back here at $8,000. And he scored 34 points last week. That was against the Texans, but he has shown in the past that when he has been active, he's been close to a top 12 back, if not a top 12. So at 8K, this is almost a lock for me. Looking to pick a lot of Khalil Herbert and Jamal Williams, and I think if you want to pivot away from them, you can, because there is other value there. But I'm probably looking to pick those two and a running back in the flex. Flex running backs you can pick. You've got Saquon McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, who've Saquon's been good, but the other two have been underwhelming, but have a chance to bounce back. Chubb and Henry, as I mentioned before. The rest of them I'm not really too interested in, though. So, yeah, this kind of build, we'll throw a DST in there. So you got the Cowboys so Washington got mauled by the Eagles last week. Dallas mauled the Giants last week. So I think Cowboys are my number one option as a defense at the moment. We've also got the Packers coming up against Brian Hoyer at quarterback. Maybe a slight trap because I think that just means New England run the ball a bit more. But Green Bay's defense is looking good. They just held Tampa Bay to 12 points. I'm not going to read too much into the Chicago game. And they normally do poorly week one. So I don't mind the Packers at that price. I do like the Cowboys as my number one option. The Eagles are in play if it's going to be a rain game, I think. It just depends how much you rate Jacksonville and their progression from last year to this year. Got the Chargers against Houston, who are also an option. Chargers were poor against Jacksonville, but Houston are a clear step down, and Chargers do have weapons on the defensive side to make things difficult for Houston. And then the one I think is a sneaky option is Tennessee. I think their defense is better than people give it credit for. They've been conceding 20 points a game, but they didn't have any problems getting to the quarterback against the Giants, and Matt Ryan for the Colts has been taking a lot of sacks. So they could be a sneaky one to rack up the sacks, maybe get a few turnover plays on defense and score well. Not really too interested in these cheaper options, and with all the value on this slate, like two guys under 10K at running back, and not really any premium wide receivers to think about because Stephon Diggs is the only one that's over 14K. So with not too many premium options that you have to jam into your team, I'm paying up for defense this week. On that topic of value, I've gone through running backs, but there is a ton of wide receivers that are under 7K that are definitely playable, capable of hitting 20 points and delivering a great outcome for your team. We'll go team by team, I guess. Tennessee have Burks at 7K, who's slowly getting more target share. It's only a matter of time before he has a big game. Probably one of my lower preferred options this game, just because there are guys in better offenses with bigger roles. Jahan Dodson, he's down to almost 6K. He's the clear. I think he's the clear third option in this offense that has been scoring well. Probably avoiding this week because I do think Dallas will get after Carson Wentz a bit, and I think Carson Wentz is just going to be a bit like Donald was last year. Got off to a hot start the first two, and then he's kind of gotten back to usual, I think, after being destroyed by the Eagles last week. Cowboys, you've got Noah Brown and Michael Gallup. Noah Brown has looked good with Cooper Rush. Just not sure how much of his targets move to Michael Gallup if Gallup is active, which it looks like. Either of these two could pop off this week. But yeah, it's hard to know which one will be the number two behind CD Lamb. Also worth noting with Noah Brown last week that he was the clear number two receiving option because Dalton Schultz was out, so that adds an extra layer of things. Giants have got no wide receivers. Richie James is like their most expensive wide receiver. Could David Sills go off? I mean, maybe. Kenny Golladay is just dropping everything. Darius Slayton, if he's active, potentially. I don't know. Probably fading these guys. Pittsburgh, you've got George Pickens, who has been making big plays but hasn't been getting involved as much as you would like. He could break out this week. Only 5 receptions in 3 games. You would need the Pittsburgh offense to use him more in order to pick him, but I don't mind him either way. He's clearly talented. Jets have got no one. The Jags, I don't think have anyone. Eagles, no one. Detroit. So at Detroit this week, obviously they're missing DeAndre Swift, whose targets probably go to Jamal Williams. But they're also missing Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark. They're number 1 and their number 2 wide receiver targets. So that means that if they're going to throw the ball, which I assume they will, these targets have to go somewhere. You've also got TJ Hawkinson, who is playing the tight end position, maybe defaults to being the number 1 target this week, and he could put up a big score. You've still got wide receivers that are going to be involved. You had Josh Reynolds, who is questionable himself, but I think he's on the right side of questionable and expected to play. 2 decent fantasy scores, 6 receptions last week and 3 receptions and a touchdown the week before. So he's capable of putting up a score similar to the previous 2 weeks, or even going bigger with a bigger role in this offense. And the other one is Khalif Raymond. He only got 1 reception, 4 yards last week, but I think he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. And yeah, he's one that could put up a big score with a much bigger role than he has been getting. Seahawks, no. Buffalo, I mentioned before, Isaiah McKenzie is probably the one to look at. He's going to be the number 3 in this offense, but it should be a high-scoring offense if the weather stays away. Uh, Atlanta, not really. They've got Zacchaeus, who's been putting up okay numbers, but not a real target for me. Uh, Arizona is interesting this week. Hollywood Brown goes up in price. Dortch is going to be active. There's going to be a third wide receiver involved, or some kind of mix between Andy Isabella and Andre Bocellia. Not sure if that's correct. If Rondale Moore is active, then he's 6K and is going to be in a bunch of my teams. I don't think he will be, though. Carolina, there is Chenault at 6K, but he's not an option. Denver and Vegas. Mac Hollins. He's one that's definitely interesting. Put up two good scores. These were both with Hunter Renfrow active as well. Hunter Renfrow being the second wide receiver on this offense normally, but he is out this week with concussion, so Mac Hollins should have a decent role in this offense. 5 receptions for 66 yards and 8 receptions for a huge game last week. Derek Carr was targeting him a lot. Yeah, if he puts anything similar to last week, then he's just a huge play. I'm going to be playing him a lot based off the last 2 weeks and the fact that Renfrow is out. And then New England have got the quarterback downgrade in Brian Hoyer this week. But you've got Devontae Parker, who put up a big score last week. He might be the number one in this offense from in terms of wide receivers. We don't know. New England is still New England. And there are other options like Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne in that offense, but I'm not really sure who the number one is. And with Hoyer at quarterback, I think I'm going to avoid the situation altogether. But I think they are in play if you want to pick them. And then Green Bay could take a flyer on Christian Watson scoring a touchdown, I guess. 2 receptions and 3 receptions. Young and talented, but might take a bit of time to come along. Yeah, that. So I've gone through all these cheap options. I'm just going to chuck it Mac Hollins in my team. And so this kind of structure, maybe I'll get rid of Gabe Davis, sorry. This kind of structure is basically what I'm looking to build my teams like if the Buffalo and Baltimore game goes ahead. Well, not goes ahead in good conditions. And it's just, yeah, it's a really simple structure, I think. These two are pretty much locked for me. If I've got the money, I might go a Khalil Herbert to a Chubb or a Henry. Yeah, it just gives you options to play around with another wide receiver. You don't have to go Mac Hollins. There's a bunch of cheap guys I just went through. You can go, yeah, combination of two like decent-ish wide receivers here. So maybe like a Cortland Sutton looks good, especially if you, those two playing in the same game as like the secondary shootout. That would allow you to go for like a Amari Cooper. Where is Pittman? Pittman's a bit more expensive, but you could go a little bit cheaper on the defense. But yeah, or you can go for another cheap option and a high-end running back in the flex. So you say you put JT there, 8.5 grand. I'm sure you'll find someone in there that you like. Elijah Moore potentially. Zay Jones has looked good. But yeah, there's a lot of cheap options around 6K. So What would I do in this situation? I would probably move a Khalil Herbert up to a Chubb if I can afford that. That's going to make me a little bit short. What would I do? Could move Jamal Williams up, but I'm pretty confident that he should score just as well as like the Chubb and Henry types, if not better. How would I differentiate here? Could go the cheaper defense, like maybe a Titans, and they'll give you 10K for a wide receiver, and there's a bunch of cheap guys there. Tyler Lockett, Devonta Smith, Garrett Wilson, a lot of cheap guys around that range. But yeah. So pretty much this is kind of my default structure for this week, assuming that the Buffalo Baltimore game goes together. Mix and match a few 6K wide receivers, mix and match some DSTs. Assuming that game doesn't go ahead, then things get a bit more difficult. Other quarterbacks that would be in play I'd probably be looking towards Herbert against Houston, hoping that the Chargers bounce back, and you compare him with a Josh Palmer who's very cheap this week, considering that Keenan Allen's still out. Mike Williams got a price downgrade as well based off last week. Chargers could bounce back. The other game that's really interesting, just from a narrative perspective, maybe not from a fantasy perspective, is Denver and Vegas, both teams that have been underwhelming this year. Denver are 2-1, but it's not a convincing 2-1. Questions around Nathaniel Hackett, and the Raiders are 0-3 with Josh McDaniels, who hasn't shown the NFL world yet that he is capable of being a quality head coach. So with that in mind, is this the game that Denver clicks together? I mean, it could happen. If that is the case, then you've got Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is a Vegas player, but you can easily stack this game and hope that Wilson and Denver can actually start to gel and find a bit of form. Could also go Carr instead of Wilson in this spot. Yeah, other than that, there's really not a lot of options that are too appealing. I mean, Kyler's always all right. Carolina's defense has been decent this year. You got Goff, but he's just lost a bunch of weapons. Wentz, who might be decapitated this week by Micah Parsons. And yeah, just a lot of really, I don't know, a lot of cheap options that aren't too appealing. So yeah, I mean Lamar and Allen is just it's clear 1 and 2 favorite options on this slate, but we need to monitor weather. So yeah, I hope. Yeah, that's pretty much what I think you should take away is that I think we need to wait until either tonight or early tomorrow Australian time to build our lineups. And you can build your lineups now if you want, but I think there's a decent chance that you're going to have to tear them apart. In terms of how worried I am for Baltimore and Buffalo, I'm going to let the betting lines decide how much exposure I should have, and also have a look at the field pre-game. Because if it's rain soaked and anything like Soldier Field was a few weeks ago for that Chicago and San Francisco game, then I really only want to have limited exposure to it. But if it's raining and the field looks fine, then honestly, I'm happy to load up this game. The other thing that's going to be interesting is how many people enter. I think normally when I do these videos, normally around 800 people that have entered the contest. It's down on numbers this week, possibly due to the uncertainty. Um, so there is a chance that this game goes under in entries. So yeah, from a personal point of view, I've got a number in mind that I want to enter, which is 20 teams. Um, I think this week is a lot harder, so naturally I want to enter less teams. But if the contest is if everyone else is thinking like that, and the contest doesn't get to full numbers, say it only hits 3,000 people, then there's an extra 5 grand in the prize pool that's effectively free money because it's 50,000 guaranteed. So if that's the case, then I might end up entering more one ups than I want to, and trying to capitalize on the uncertainty of it, and the higher expected ROI with less people in the prize pool. So yeah, I'm going to be up at 2, 3 o'clock Australian time, probably frantically building lineups. But yeah, I hope that this video has helped in some way. I guess it's probably left some of you with more questions than answers. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed the video, and good luck with this week if you are participating.